Hi and welcome to another episode of What Do You Do? Today I'm speaking to Jacky Leonard. Jacky is a L&D consultant and an author. I've known Jacky for quite some time, and she is probably one of my main inspirations for wanting to get into L&D, teaching, presenting, and all things education, really. Jack and I, as always, discuss quite a wide and varied range of topics. One of my favourite things that came out of this conversation was a question that she shared with me. I almost considered renaming the show after doing this discussion because it's almost a much better question than the one I ask. But I'd already done a few episodes and had all the branding done by that point. But joking aside, the question is, what are you for? Which I think is a very, very interesting concept. And we dig into that in the show. So hopefully you enjoy it. Please let me know. If you can, like, share, subscribe. It does really, really help. And without further ado, on with today's episode. Jacky Leonard, welcome to What Do You Do? Thank you for coming on and thanks for your time. We always start with the same question, which is, what do you do? So I know that there is a kind of a variety of things that you do and have done in the past, but if you want to give me just the elevator pitch, essentially.
The elevator pitch, oh, crikey. So what I currently do, in a nutshell, is I'm a learning and development consultant. And as part of that role, I provide a variety of interventions, which includes things like training, facilitation, consultancy work, and coaching.
So you've been doing that for quite a while now, haven't you? Because I remember a couple of years ago, when I was in fitness, you were coming in, and I believe that you were working for yourself, contracting and doing the L&D piece for the company I was working for at the time, and that was
I think you're being kind with a couple of years, Ian. I think that was a long time ago now. Your sense of timing is as good as mine. So yeah, I was looking at it the other day. I think it's 17 or 18 years ago, Ian, when I gave up what my brother calls a proper job and started and went self-employed. So yeah, it was that long ago now. Yeah,
I was going to say it's more like a couple of decades, isn't it? Let's be honest, than a couple of years.
Closer to that. Yeah
Gosh, it goes so fast. So who were you before you were who you are now? So what was the proper job that you gave up?
Okay, so the last proper job I had was I was learning and development manager for said company we've just talked about. So a big leisure company that doesn't exist as we knew it any longer, but DC Leisure. And as part of that, I think at the time, the company had over 6,000 staff. So across England. So yeah, I was responsible for helping close the skills gaps. That's the easiest way to put it within that company. Although I was the lone L&D person, there were a lot of other people, contract managers, general managers, that helped deliver a lot of that, as well as external providers.
Yeah, because this was almost before the likes of lifetime and apprenticeships and all that sort of thing really took off, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that was sort of really early doors, because I think at the time, Lifetime came and spoke to us about apprenticeships. So yeah, that was, it's the years go so quickly, don't they? But and there's obviously apprenticeships have had a variety of different incarnations since then.
Yeah, very much so. So why the change? What was it that pushed you from a job that you seem to really enjoy and were really good at out to doing the lone wolf stuff?
Yeah, there was there was a moment. There was definitely a moment when I sort of made a decision. I think I started my coaching journey either just prior to that or at that sort of same time as I transitioned, because prior to that I was still working in leisure, but I worked as a general manager, business development manager, contract manager was my last management job in leisure. And then went into L&D. I knew I wanted to do that. I'd gone and studied and got my PGCE and coaching qualifications. And I had a part of NLP that I also did. It one of the exercises is to do a sort of almost a rocking chair sort of exercise where you sit there and you look back as if you're, yeah. So it's like almost future pacing and then looking back, where you sit there and go, okay, I've done, I've retired. If I look back, am I happy with my lot?
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, well, I am. I've always loved what I've done, so that's cool. Is there something else I'd like to do? And I thought, yeah, well, actually, yeah, there is. Wouldn't it be nice to have to see if I could do this for myself, which would give me a bit more freedom to work outside of the constraints of the organisation that I was working in, although I loved that working with that organisation and the people in it. And so that planted the seed, Ian. And then the moment was I sat in a people management meeting, and I remember thinking, haven't we gone all through this last month and the month before? and you sit there and you start having that Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Yeah? And I thought, oh, this feels a bit like Groundhog Day now.
Yeah.
And that was the moment I sort of went away and I thought, nope, done. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember ringing, well, you'll know, Rich Millard. I remember ringing Rich, who was my boss at the time, and saying, just to give you the heads up, I've decided I'm going to leave. But it probably won't be, and this was like, I think the February, but it won't be until Christmas, after Christmas.
Right.
So, and I thought, and the purpose of that, I thought, I'll give them plenty of time to replace me, and it'll give me time to adjust and all that sort of stuff. And he said nothing happened. And then it was like our regular monthly meetings came along, and he said, I just need to set a date for our regular monthly meetings and that other thing you talked about. As if I wasn't going to do it. I said, well, actually, I'm going to,
Oh dear. So what was the biggest thing that was standing in your way?
Of leaving?
Yes.
Safety, I guess. It's safety, isn't it? And I suppose, I think I do have a little bit of a security value in the, it's nice to be in an environment where you are surrounded by people you trust. And I've been working with DC for a while, so and people I liked.
Yeah.
And having a salary going to the bank every month, and so there's that certain amount of comfort. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, for anybody making a change, it doesn't matter whether it's becoming self-employed, but making a change, is you're taking a step into the unknown.
Yeah.
You really don't know what's going to happen next, and that can be quite it's a leap of faith. It can be quite a scary proposition to go from, I'm comfortable here. People know me and respect me. I know them. I like it. And then go, right, okay, all change.
Yeah.
And so I think that I knew I'd made the right decision, because once I'd made the decision, I felt like a weight had been lifted. But I had no idea how I was going to make it work. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to make it work. Yeah.
So how did you overcome? How did you overcome that? Oh, it's scary.
Well, funnily, how I overcame it was to start putting things together during those months that I was still working. putting together a business proposition and thinking about who my target audience was and what I was going to do, have a bit of coaching for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made a decision to take a sabbatical.
Right.
So when I left work, I decided I was going to take 3 or 4 months out. And what I decided to do, barking mad, what I decided to do was to go and play in the Welsh Hills for 4 months, 3-4 months. And so I went to Plaza Brenin, and the reason I decided to do this was because I thought, well, do you know, if I'm working in L&D, my job is to push people out of their comfort zone and get them into this position of stretch so that they learn something. And that can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I've not experienced that discomfort myself for so long. What can I put myself through that I'll get that discomfort quite quickly? And it was, let's go and play outdoors. I mean, I'd done lots of different sports at a reasonable level, but I'd never really engaged with outdoor activities.
Okay.
So this was like climbing, kayaking, canoeing,
Yeah.
all those sports where if you get it wrong, there's a risk of gnarly death. I'd not done sports like that before. I'd done a little bit when I was in the army, obviously, but not really pushing myself up. And it was every morning I got up and we were taken into the hills or taken onto the water, and I was way out of my comfort zone. So it served its purpose.
Okay, so that was that. Almost, if I can do this, I can do anything piece.
Yeah, I think there was an element of that. And I remember going and somebody recommended going to see Tony Robbins was in London.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember going to Excel and doing a Tony Robbins experience, we'll call it, yeah.
Yeah.
And whatever you say about Tony Robbins, I know he's a bit Marmite, yeah. Some people love him, some people hate him. The event was a real thought-provoking eye-opener, and he's on stage for pretty much 24 hours. He's up there the whole time, and his energy and his enthusiasm. And at the end of that first day, you do a fire walk.
Yeah.
And I remember part of it, and right at the beginning of the day, you signed a disclaimer to say, if you come away with burned stumps, tough, in essence, tough, you've already signed to say that's your own fault. Right. So they make you sign the disclaimer, and then during the day builds you up to this firewalk. And that was one of those experiences I remember where I came away thinking, if I can walk on hot coals, anything's possible. And that was the point, obviously, is to crush, get rid of all those limiting beliefs. So I think again, that was timely experience for me.
Nice. So apart from Tony Robbins, who else was there that helped you?
I got to give a plug to Brian Main as well, because he did a similar sort of thing, but he does a workshop, and his workshop in some respects is the exercise a little bit more scary. What he gets you as a limiting belief project to do is to have an arrow, with a wooden shaft, and you put the point of the arrow there, and the shaft is against the wall. You're right on your limiting beliefs on the shaft, that's against the wall. And as you are getting rid of your belief, your weight.
Wow.
With your weight. Now that I was more apprehensive about that than walking on hot coals.
Yeah, I think
I've still got the arrow somewhere, but the snapped arrow somewhere.
Yeah. And do you mind sharing with us what that limiting belief was, if you can remember?
Oh, crikey. It's a good question. Whatever it was, it didn't stop me from doing what I wanted to do. But I think there was an element, Ian, of not being enough. Yeah. And I think that's all often a stopping point for people, is that, am I good enough? Can am I up to this challenge?
Mm.
Will I be able to do this? So I think that, you know, that there's always that sort of limiting theme has been there. And then I think once you start getting there, there's almost sometimes you think you have to pinch yourself because you start getting that imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here I am. I've got quite a nice life now. Oh, hang on. Should I be
Who's gonna
here?
come take it
Yeah,
away?
yeah, this is
Yeah.
me, you know, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because you're not the first person who's mentioned the "Am I enough" piece, and it's definitely something that I've been thinking a lot about since the last conversation I had about it. And two things spring to mind. One was the thought I had as a result of the first conversation, which was enough for who?
Yes.
So who was that for you? Am I enough for?
I think it is, am I enough to deal with what I have to deal? I'm sure if I was answering that question when I was a lot younger, there would have been, I think one of the, I have in the past, less so now. The older I get, the less shits I give. But you know, as a younger person, I was a people pleaser,
Mm,
and I did care about what people thought about, particularly those people that I respected.
mm,
You know, I cared about what they thought and
yeah.
how they felt about me. Probably more about that than what I thought about myself. And I think
Mm,
I've slowly but surely flipped that on its head. And now I think about what I feel about that rather than what do you feel about it?
yeah. Yeah. Am I enough for me at the
Yeah,
end of the day?
yeah,
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 definitely.
yeah.
Because what I've certainly realised is that all those people that you're thinking, am I enough for them? Am I making them proud? They're probably not giving you a second thought.
You're absolutely,
And I don't mean that in a nasty
yeah,
way. It's
yeah.
just that how many of us do?
No, no.
How many of us do sit there thinking, oh, I'm very disappointed in Jacky
Yeah,
today?
yeah. We're too caught up in our own stuff, aren't we? Really? Yeah,
As is everybody else.
yeah,
As is
yeah.
everybody else. Yeah, definitely. And the other thought that I had actually from you saying not enough is no, you probably weren't enough then. And that's part of the journey, right?
Yeah,
Am I enough? Not yet, but if I
yeah,
keep on, one day I will be.
yeah. And the not yet piece, I think. I don't know if you've read Carol Dweck's
No.
Mindset, right? So
Oh,
mindset,
yes,
yeah.
yes,
So and the concept of not yet,
yes.
that's threads through the whole theme. Is that, you know, of course we learn. That's how we learn. Mostly we learn through failure. You know, we learn
Yes.
through I'm not in the right place now. And actually, by saying yes and trying these things and
Mhm.
learning from failing or learning from not getting it right, it doesn't mean that that's the end. It means actually that that's a stepping stone on my journey. And I think that is the point. Yeah, that's a good point you've raised there. Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love one of my favorite sayings is the second best way to learn is from your mistakes.
Yeah.
Being that the best way to learn is from someone else's mistakes.
Yeah. That's if you're really smart, though, isn't it? It's not many of us. Not many of us that clever, I think. Yeah. I mean, NLP is all about that. NLP is all about looking at, you know, how somebody else has mastered it and
Mm,
taking their techniques. So I'm pleased that that's there. But I think most of us, you know, put our own hands in the fire, don't we? Because we don't believe it's hot.
oh gosh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, which I actually physically did when I was a child. Being told constantly that the coals on the barbecue were hot, even though they were black. But no, I had to pick it up and touch it to find out, and I certainly found out. Um, did you know anybody else at that time in your life that had done not specifically the thing that you wanted to do, as in go off and be a self-employed L&D practitioner, but set out on their own?
Um, I, not really. Not people that were close to me.
Hmm.
Nobody in my family had ever been self-employed, so I'd not had those sort of role models. In fact, I remember sitting my mum and dad down because I knew my dad's can be a bit of a doom goblin sometimes. Yeah, you know.
I
Um,
love that phrase.
and I remember sitting them down and sort of when I'd made a decision and sitting down and saying, right, and the opener was, right, I'm gonna tell you something now, and I want you to listen. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to ask any questions. And when I finish telling you, I want you to be happy for me and to support my decision. God knows what they thought I was going to tell them. Yeah? But I think when I actually said I'm going to give up my job and I'm starting freelance, I think they thought it was a relief, you know. So that's perhaps the best way to tee it up. But yeah, so that's the situation I was. But no, I didn't really have anybody close to think, yeah, that's doable or that. I mean, obviously, you know, you see people, but those people that you see that are making a real success of it, like the authors and the Tony Robbinses, the coaches of this world, you almost think that, you know, that's unattainable. That's not, that's too far for you. But I never, you know, the reason I didn't do it because I wanted to make £1 million. I didn't do it because I wanted the. We all have different returns on investment, don't we? And mine have never really been only financial. Of course, there has to be a financial element. Mine have been as much things like, am I in a situation where I can make a difference or feel like I'm making a difference? You know, am I enjoying this? Is this, you know, am I working with people that share my values? Is it challenging me? You know, am I learning something? So those things are on my ROI list, as well as, am I earning enough money?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you've mentioned the values piece. So, and you've also mentioned a few of your values, but can you talk a bit more on what are your values? What is important to you? What won't you compromise on?
Okay, so that was a lofty, very at the time, a lofty decision I made when I gave up a proper job. I thought in my head, I promised myself that I wouldn't work with people that didn't share my values or I didn't believe shared my values. And obviously now with hindsight, I realize that was a big ask. Yeah. And I could have ended up with no money, but I was lucky. So fairness is definitely up there for me. Making a difference and being around people who want to make a difference. Loyalty. I have a big loyalty value. So I suppose they're probably up there as a top 3, I think. Yeah.
How does that conversation take place and form when you are meeting a new client? Because obviously with L&D, it's all about what is the problem?
Yeah.
Is the solution that I have one that's going to solve the problem that you have? Do these two things align? How are we going to get there? And then also, what are your values and morals, by the way?
Yeah. I think some of that comes out in conversation. You do get, yeah, there are times where you get it wrong. And I think for me, it's about people don't share their values openly, you know. So it's listening, isn't it? It's listening to what's happening, and I think it's more about watching what people do, Ian, rather than. So a lot of that is, if it's a company, if it's a corporate, checking out their website, checking out their recruitment adverts, for example. You know, how do their staff feel about them? How are they treating people? Because that, you know, that's important to me. And then, you know, when you have that initial conversation with somebody, really listening to what they say, and asking some questions about how they do that. But sometimes I think you almost you can want to work with someone and then find out they're not what you expected them to be. And I have walked away from clients in the past, coaching clients before even setting up with them, or I've had initial conversations with companies and then gone, no, I don't think I can help you at this time, because actually what you've said you need now and what I think you need now are two different things.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that you need to have the integrity to do that, because if you do that and you're honest about it, people will come back to you when they are ready.
They appreciate that authenticity.
Yeah.
Right? Simon Sinek talks about this really eloquently, and he gives an example of a boss, and he gets a phone call from his secretary. The secretary says, "Oh, I've got so and so on the line for you," and the boss says, "Oh, tell them I'm not here." And when one of the principles, supposedly, of the organisation is about honesty.
Yes.
And those two things are just completely
misaligned. Yeah.
Whereas he could have said, "I'll call him back. I'm busy right now. Take a message."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? I think, again, what I've learned over the years is to listen to what people say and then watch what they do.
Yes. Yeah.
Because those two things aren't always aligned.
Definitely.
And we're all guilty of it. We make decisions on a minute by minute basis on what you're going to do. So we're all guilty of that misalignment. It's just how big a gap you're willing to accept, I think, in what people say and what people do.
Yeah, and how consistently as well. Is it one-off? Is it a slip? Or is it actually, something deeper? And I think people can take from what you were saying there a lot away, not just if they are self-employed, but if they are going for a job interview. It shouldn't just be about, "Hi, I'm here, please give me a job, please pay me." It should be a two-way process. It should be, am I the right person for you, and are you the right company for me? Definitely.
And that's advice I give to anybody that's going for an interview, job interview, is do your homework. Look that company up. It's easy to do that these days. In fact, if they've advertised on Indeed or something like that, there's information about them, and generally information about what their employers think about them. That's scored these days. So go and check them out. Check out their culture, what they say their values are. Find out what people feel and think about them, and then decide. You may have to do a values exercise yourself first. What do I really? What's really important to me? But once you've decided what's really important to you, see if the same things are really important to them. Because in my experience, people leave organizations because of that misalignment. And what people generally won't move from their comfort zone until they are in pain, emotionally in pain, until they go, "I can't deal with this anymore. This is driving me mental. I'm going." And that's sad that, we have to wait to be in that much discomfort before we move on to something that potentially could be better.
As you say, it's about loss aversion, isn't it? People are more motivated to move away from something bad than they are towards something good. I think there's a statistic that if you lose £5, you have to find £10 in order for that to equal out for you.
Right. Well, I really believe that. I think more people will move away from have the away motivation than the towards motivation.
Definitely. When you were thinking about your future, when you were you'd sat your mum and dad down, you'd given them the speech, you were, fantasizing about how amazing it was going to be. What did that look like?
Oh, see, if do you know what? If I'm really honest, I don't think I've ever had any really specific goals.
Okay, seems really interesting.
I wish I wish I could sit here and say, as a coach particularly, that sits down with people and goes, "Right, what's your goal?" my goals were really smart, but I'm not sure they
Yeah.
were. Um,
Okay.
my when I was in school, the thing I excelled most at was sport,
Mm.
right, and English. Right. So I like reading, I like writing poems, I liked and doing sport, right? Um, so those are the two things I really, really thoroughly enjoyed. And all I knew is that when I left school, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something that I would enjoy and do
Yeah.
something I was good at. And ideally, in my head, I wanted to work in sport and earn money by doing something I was, because that's what I was good at, that I was good at and I enjoyed. And so that was the driver. It wasn't a smart goal. It was a sort
Mm.
of it was an aim to enjoy what I did and to work in a particular industry.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't really have any clarity around what that looked like. Whether that was I toyed with PE teacher.
Yeah.
I toyed with working in sport. Sport. I mean, sport and leisure at the time were very that was early doors. That was for leisure management, leisure centres. That was almost like the field of dreams philosophy with leisure, where you opened a leisure centre and they will come. Well,
Yeah.
there was none of this real commercialism around
No,
it
God, no, it's a
when
very
I
different
joined.
place. Yeah, it was the
So
British Empire,
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
it? For
yeah,
those of
yeah,
us who worked in leisure, it was so
abs-
true.
absolutely. So it was it was a really um, and where I ended up, and this was again by accident. By accident, I sort of go with the flow most of the times, and then
Mm.
I think what I've been good at is grasping opportunities, seeing them and grasping them as they've arisen.
Yeah.
Um, and I met at the time um, that I did a summer job at Butlins, right, as as a red coat, sport, and then I was asked to go and do school venture weeks in the winter. I mean, I was a
Mm.
teenager at the time, and then I met as part of the training for the school venture weeks that we were asked to do. They got a couple of military people in to do the training. Um, and so I got chatting to these PTIs, yeah, senior PTIs, and I thought, wow, this sounds cool. What they're doing, this sounds really good. And so after that, I explored that with their help, and that's where I ended up. So before I joined leisure, I was PTI. I joined the military, and I was PTI for, and then I got a really serious injury, and that was sort of cut short. But that's where I started because of the sport thing.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because I was really taken aback when you said I'd never really had any goals. Because, I think one of the first things you probably taught me about was smart goal setting
Yeah, yeah,
and being a coach.
yeah,
All of the models, strike,
yeah,
grow, it's all
yeah,
about what do you want to achieve and then how
yeah,
you get there. So you've made a career out of helping people achieve their goals.
yeah,
But as you continue talking, it really became clear to me that you get what you focus on.
yeah,
And that's not always a good thing because if you're just focused on something very specific and very narrow,
yeah,
as you said, you can then miss out on so many opportunities that
yeah,
come your way.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think I've the other value I have is variety, and I really
Mm.
have a variety value. I would get. I hate to use the word bored because I don't think anybody ever should get bored. There is so much to do, but I would lose interest
Mm.
if I didn't have a variety of things I could get involved in. And I think
Yeah.
that's the challenge is learning new things, trying new things. I might not always stick with them because I might try
Mm.
them and think, you know what, that's not for me. But you don't know until you have a go, do you? You got to suck it and see
No,
first.
absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
I've done that. I've tried a lot of stuff. And some of it I've loved and enjoyed and it's stuck with me. And other bits I've sort of gone, okay, well, that was all right. But I don't need that anymore. I don't want to stick
Yeah.
with that. But I think if you don't you don't give yourself the opportunity to do that, you will never know.
It's almost the Thomas Edison approach. Just try
Yeah.
different things as a filament for the light bulb and see if you find the
Yeah.
one that works.
Yeah.
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 So I believe that everybody needs an element of certainty as well as variety in their life,
Yes.
and it's a balance. And again, it comes back to Tony Robbins actually,
Yeah.
with the Wheel of Life
Yeah.
thing. So where does your certainty come from? Do you have a very strong certainty base that's need a lot of variety in transposition to that?
I suppose I have a very small collection of friends. Yeah, very, very, really good friends. I'm certain about them.
Nice.
Yeah, right. Family, always been there for me. So I am, I've been very lucky in that I know if the proverbial hit the fan, they would be there for me. And also, I'm certain that whatever happened tomorrow, I would find a way. All right. And I have that certainty in myself, is that I know I have enough transferable skills to make something work.
Yeah.
And I think I've always had that, even, and I used to say to people years ago, do you know what? If it all goes belly up, I can go and be a lifeguard. And so, but I know I have enough transferable skills that I can, and I'm not, my ego isn't such that I wouldn't care what it was. I would find a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people's ego is very strongly attached to what they do. And what they do is almost who you are.
Yeah.
And that was also one of the inspirations, I guess, for the title of this, because it's one of the first things that people ask you, isn't it, when they first meet you? What do you do? Because they're trying to get a measure of who you are.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a story that that was told to me. So a friend of mine, a colleague actually used to work with down in Cheltenham, her son, and he's now, in his 30s, works in the city, whatever. But when he was little, apparently, what he used to do when he was introduced to a new person, he would ask them a question. And the question he asked for a little kid used to freak him out a little bit because it was so unexpected and actually quite a deep philosophical question, right? And the question,
I need to rename the name of my podcast after this question.
And the question was, so his mum would sort of say, "Oh, Matt, this is so and so," and he'd go, "Oh, hi, Ian. What are you for?
Oh,
what are you for?"
Wow.
Now, when she told me the story, I listened and I thought, oh my God, never mind a 4 or 5-year-old asking you that question, if an adult asked me that question, I'm not sure I could answer it immediately.
I could not burst into tears.
Yeah, you can just see, can't you, people's eyes going all around their head looking for an answer.
Existential question, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love it.
Because it's more than what you do. It's who are you? What are your values? What do you stand for? What won't you stand for? It's all those things encompassed in those few words.
Yeah. What do you bring to this planet? What do you bring? What are you for? What's your purpose? Almost. Yeah. What a good question. I love that.
It's a fabulous question.
Yeah. Not sure it's going to make many friends at a dinner party.
I challenge you next time you're in a networking meeting to go up to, and instead of saying what you do, go, what are you for?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm making many friends. But hey, she needs friends. Right, I'm going to drag us back to my list of questions. So although you didn't have a clear picture of what you were aiming towards, have things turned out broadly the way that you expected them to, or the way that you planned?
I've had a ball. I've actually, I remember when I was in probably my early, late teens. I remember sitting down, saying to my father, because my father had always done jobs he didn't really like, yeah, because he was a breadwinner, he needed to put money, food on the table, blah blah. And I remember saying to him, "I'm not going to do that." I said, "I'm only ever going to do something I love." And he did really went, "Life's not like that, Jack," right? And then years later, I must have been in my early 30s, and I'd sort of done things that I'd enjoyed. And he could see that. I don't think your parents know exactly what you do, but what he did know is that I enjoyed doing it. And he then turned to me and he went, "Fair play for you. You've always enjoyed what you've done, haven't you?" And I went, "Yep." And that's been important to me. And again, I think I've been fortunate enough to seize the opportunities that have given me those returns on the investment that I wanted. That list I mentioned to you earlier, in terms of challenge, and they've been there. So most of the things that I've gone, yeah, I'd like to do that. The doors have opened for me, and I've been able to tick my list of returns on investment.
It's funny you should say that, because I had a very similar experience with my mum, because I think we were, I don't know if we were one of the first generations, but it kind of feels like we were one of the first generations who felt like you could choose
Yes.
a lot more what you wanted to do and what you wanted to be, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because you chose the wrong thing and it's down to you. You've got no one else to blame. But my mum was very adamant that I should go and get a job in Tesco when I'd finished college. But I did work experience at a local gym, and it was the best 2 weeks of my life. But my God, that poor fitness manager, every single lunchtime I went to that gym and said, "Have you got a job for me yet?" And in the end, she found a job for me just to shut me up and stop me going. But that absolutely informed the rest of my career.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the benefit of keeping on somebody's radar, isn't it?
Yes. So it kind of has turned out the way you planned then, but has there been a cost?
I I think that if you are, I wouldn't say I've probably been single-minded at some things. I think anything you want, there's a poem, and one of the couple of lines in the poem says, anything you want of worth, you have to work to gain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is always this payoff, isn't there? Yeah. Whether that's time that you'd rather be spending somewhere else, or whether you've poured yourself into that particular activity or that particular area to the detriment of someone or something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's, you if you talk to, or if you read about a lot of professional athletes, they'll talk about the sacrifice. I think anything that you want of worth, you have to be willing to put the time and the effort and the energy into, to see to get any reward. So but I think that you don't see it as a sacrifice if you're doing something you love. And again, I'll refer back to Brian Main here. One of the things he always suggests is to do the thing that makes your heart sing. And I think that is just a wonderful philosophy, isn't it? If you can pour yourself into something you love, then that will hopefully make you a more productive person, but also make you a happier person, and it'll be easier. Or any sacrifices you have to make, they'll seem less of a sacrifice, I think, because you're doing what you want, what you love.
Yeah. So I don't know if I was confused about that thought, because for a long time I worked and I made money from my hobby, and that almost tainted the hobby for a while.
Right.
And then latterly I think I've come to a different conclusion on it, and it's the thing that you love isn't necessarily the thing that you love to do. It's the thing that aligns with your morals, your
Yeah.
values, as opposed to just something you're good at, something you enjoy. It needs to, as you said, to make your heart sing, it needs to align with a deeper part of you than just that superficial,
Mm.
oh, I enjoy this, this is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love, so I mentioned earlier poetry. I've
Mm,
written poetry periodically throughout my life. Mostly it's been a cathartic experience for me,
mm,
never thinking that it would go anywhere or do anything. Now, over the years, I've sort of got quite a collection of, and during COVID, I fell back on into it.
mhm.
Um, and actually it became a real lifesaver in some respects
Mm,
for me, to deal with COVID. um, I wrote I wrote a lot more than I had for years during that period, because I you feel you have the time.
yeah,
um, and and also, people were doing things on Facebook to try and amuse each other, weren't they?
yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, oh, and I saw this and I thought, oh, what can I do? So I thought, I know what I'm going to do. Every day I'm going to come on, I'm going to recite a poem for people. Yeah.
Nice.
And it's not going to be mine necessarily. In the start of it was, I'm going to recite a poem for people just to make them feel better. And I'm going to throw it open and say, if you've got a favorite poem you'd like me to come on and recite, let's do that. So this went on for 100. I'd stopped it at 100 days, Ian, because I
Wow.
know. And every day I'd either somebody'd say, oh, could you, my mum loves this one, or I
Mm,
really like this one, could you read? So I'd go and I'd find it and I'd read it, or I'd know it and I'd recite it. And then I even threw, because I used to not share mine at all, I even then did a few of mine. And it was such a, it was a commitment, but it was such a lovely thing to do. And I thought, but we'd gone in and out of COVID, and I thought, right,
yeah.
how do I end this now?
Mm,
And so the last day, the 100th day, I actually wrote a poem about 100 days of poetry, and that was the last poem.
nice.
But it's that is one of those things, again, that I'm passionate about, I love to do, but it isn't necessary, it isn't something that's going to make it isn't something I can make a living out of. I'm sure, poets do,
Yes.
authors
Yeah.
do, yeah.
Yes.
Um, but it was something I wanted to do. And again, I wrote a book a few years ago, a business book, but that was not because I wanted to, because I think
Yeah.
there's a book in all of us.
Yeah.
So, it was something I wanted to do. So I think we should give ourselves permission to do those things, that you love, you enjoy, not always because you think it's going to make you money, but because just the pure enjoyment and the creativity of,
Yeah.
giving yourself a go.
Yeah. That passion project's part.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And you should live with passion in your life. And I think
yeah,
having a project to do that, yeah, is a great vehicle for it.
yeah, yeah. And so, I coach a lot of people with, that in helping professions. Say,
Mhm.
I've coached physiotherapists and beauticians and things like that, and they and some of them are not business people. They are doing it because they're good at that particular thing. They went into it because they were interested and passionate about that particular thing. And some of them, you talk to them about the business part of it, and it's almost like it's almost like a dirty conversation.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that, so. But because, and again, different RIs.
Yeah, yeah, but equally, going back to limiting beliefs, and I don't know how much truth there is in this story, but it's a nice story. So it's about Richard Branson, and apparently he was in one of his meetings with Virgin Media, or one of the many companies he's been really successful in. And the shareholders were all in there talking, and they were talking about profits, gross profits, net profits, and became apparent that he didn't know what the difference was between a gross profit and a net profit. And at the time, the guy's a millionaire. And one of the guys takes him outside and says, look, think of all the fish in the ocean. That's your gross profit. Throw a net into the ocean, you pull those fish out, those ones you get to keep and take home, that's your net profit. And it's a really nice story. And it's two things to me. One, it's how nicely stories and can make a complex thing quite
Yeah.
simple. But also someone who is incredibly financially successful and potentially doesn't know that much about the intricacies of business.
Mm.
But if you do have an idea and you are passionate and you go after something 100%, you can still be incredibly successful.
Yeah, and I think you need to probably define what success means to you.
Yeah,
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 because success is different very different to different people.
yeah, yeah. Had a really good conversation just yesterday, actually, about the difference between success, happiness, and contentment. And that contentment is almost a better goal than happiness, because
Yeah,
happiness is fleeting.
yeah,
There's almost an expectation in society now that we should all be happy all the time, which is just unrealistic and
yeah,
not appropriate often as well.
yeah,
And a contentment is a much better goal to strive for.
yeah. And of course, all these words we use to describe values, or you know, it's our definitions. So
Mm,
when I work with people on values, I I'm at pains to to inform them that your we can both have a fairness value,
mm,
but that needs defining, because my definition of it and yours might be very different. So
mm.
and when people are working together and they start talking about their values and the culture within the organization, and they use these words, using those words are not enough.
Yeah,
You need to define what those words mean to you, so that you hopefully can find some common ground there.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And I love that concept of common ground as well, because it's the best place to meet and it's the best place to have a conversation, isn't it?
Mm.
Trying to find things you have in common with somebody.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, although success can have different measures, what is success for you? And has there been a point at which you thought, yes, I've made it, done it?
No, I don't believe in the "I've made it." I that's alien to me, that statement, because it goes against my whole belief about what life is,
Hmm.
and so working in L&D, I really believe that life is a journey. You don't there is, well, there is an end, obviously, and that's we know what that is. We hope we hope to prolong that
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
So I think there have been times on that journey where I've set where I've said I'm going to do this. I won't say I've set a goal, but I've thought I'm going to do this. So I'm more pragmatic than, it's like that's a milestone for me,
Yeah.
and I will work towards that, and I'll achieve that, and I'll go, okay, well done, that's cool. What next?
Mm.
Because a milestone means there's something else, whereas I've made it sounds
There's a final
finite. It
destination.
sounds
Yeah.
finite to me, and
Mm.
it doesn't sit well with me. I hope that I will never sit down and think I've made it,
Mm.
because then where do you go tomorrow? What's the point in getting up? What do you get up for? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you. I think so I have the journey concept where I'll have a milestone, um, and I'll have a next step, and or I'll be, I work as an associate for a number of different organizations. So my goals will be aligned with with theirs. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're balancing, or you're juggling those sort of things. So there'll be specific milestones for me, and then there'll be other milestones I'm trying to help other people achieve.
Nice. Um, I think I know the answer to this question already, but although you haven't made it because there isn't a made it for you, it's a
Yeah.
journey and there are milestones along the way and stepping stones along the way. Um, I feel like from what you said when we first spoke before we started recording around you're in a very privileged position where you can pick and choose your work. So to some people that might be I've made it. Was it worth it? Was it worth the hardship and the struggle along the way to get to where you are now?
Do you know what? I'm not sure I can talk about hardship and struggle. I've had a charmed life, and I mean, I've, I don't like to compare
Hmm. Comparisons
myself,
of thief of joy.
because
Yeah.
I think that steals your joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've had a charmed and a gifted life, really. I've and so when I think about it, of course there've been little barriers I've had to overcome, and there've been challenges along the way, but that's made life more interesting and more exciting, and I wouldn't have wanted not to have them. They're where I planned, the military was a good, I'd gone in, I'd trained to be a PTI, then I got injured and left far earlier than I anticipated. That was a challenge. At the time seemed like the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it never is. It's the start of something else. That's how. So I think you start to look at things rather than as uh, as big holes in the road. You start to look at them as ways of wherever we go, wherever we're going. And I used this analogy yesterday, actually, that there's generally an outcome that you're helping people achieve, or a milestone you're helping people achieve. The road to that is different for every person. Yeah. So if I've got a room full of learners, for example, the outcomes I've been given by the client or that I've set, they are there. The route to those outcomes is very different, and that'll depend on each person's experience, their skills, their desire to learn, etc. Yeah. So we don't all get there the most direct route, and I think sometimes not having the direct route is a more challenging but more enjoyable experience.
It is in hindsight.
Yes. Yeah. At the time, sometimes you think, really, it's but there's generally, if you think about all the things that we've been through in this country over the last few years, I'd still like to see the pot of gold, the silver lining, because I don't know, perhaps that might make me a bit naive, but I do think that there's, and I wouldn't call myself an optimist.
Okay.
I'm definitely a pragmatist. So so whatever happens, I'm looking for the solution. Yeah. And that, I suppose, is what moved me on, is that if something's happened, then I go, right, how can I fix this? Yeah.
Have you got any, we've talked about values and morals, but have you got any guiding principles? Because, as we said, it's not easy, and some people never get there, but it's easier to sit and look back at things and go, oh, that was a challenge, because you've got the hindsight of knowing that you got through it and you survived and you're fine now.
Yeah.
But when you're in the trenches of it, do you have any, like a religion or a practice or anything like that you return to that helps you get through this stuff?
I'm not particularly religious. I'm a lapsed Presbyterian. I'll go with the Dalai Lama here when he said, my religion is kindness. I wish people would be kinder. And do you know what? I wish people would be kinder to themselves. Yeah. As well as kinder to others. I think that whatever journey you're on, it starts with you, because that's all we've got control over. Yeah. So whatever you're planning to do, it's up to you. It's up to you. We get frustrated and upset and judgy about other people, and I still do. I think what I've learned is to stop and think about what I'm thinking when I'm having those feelings, because
where does this come from?
Yeah, because what if you're well, often it's a projection. You know, if I'm seeing something in others, it's often something that actually I should be addressing. So I think whatever you're doing, it starts with you. Think about, you know, it's you first. You're your first customer if you're looking in business. What are your values? What are your aspirations? What are you willing to do to get there? Because ultimately that's what you've got control. You've got control over what you think, what you feel, and what you do as a consequence. And I think if you can practice those things, because it is a daily practice, you'll never nail it. If you can practice those three things, then you will be more credible and you'll be able to influence other people better, whether you're in a leadership or management situation or you know, negotiation or whatever.
Yeah, nice. That sounds quite stoic to me.
Yeah, maybe.
Spheres of influence, spheres of concern, knowing what you can influence, what you can't influence.
Yeah. And do you know what? When somebody taught me that, and that was years ago, and somebody said it to me, I remember going away and thinking about it for ages, and it was such a great, because I think, you know, I was probably guilty at the time of being a bit of a control freak. And it was a relief to me to know that actually it wasn't everybody else. It wasn't my responsibility. That's not my responsibility. You know, I've got no control over that. And it was almost like I can let that go.
Yes.
You know, I'm responsible for me. Yeah. Okay. I can. Yeah. I should be able to deal with that.
On most days, on the better days, I can just about deal with that. Yeah. Nice. What message would you have for anyone listening who would like to? I've put the question, would like to become a ... And my original thought was to become a insert what do you do here? But I think it's bigger than that. So anyone who is facing that decision, I was on the precipice of that decision, and it doesn't have to be go it alone. It could just be try something new. What message would you have for that person?
Oh, well, it's the old Nike, isn't it? Eh?
Yeah.
Or if you want to do the JDFD, I don't know. No, do it. Yeah. Do it. And because I was the worst. I think I suffered from, certainly when I was writing the book, I suffered from perfectionist procrastination. We'll call it that, right? Where I would write something and then I would have edited it before it even, you know, almost touched the page. And so you never get anything done. And I think sometimes you just need to do it because you said it earlier, you know, at that time, that's good enough. You might look back on it a week later, a month later, a year later, years later, and go, "Oh, I would have done that differently." But not at that time. You wouldn't, because at that time you didn't know what you know now. You didn't have the experiences you've had. So I think you've just got to go. This is good enough for now. I'm gonna take that leap of faith.
And there is never a perfect time to do it.
No.
The best time to do anything is 10 years ago, right? The second best time is right now. But equally, if you don't look back on that thing and think, oh, I could do that better now, then what have you been doing? What have you been doing in the last 5 years? Because you haven't been growing and improving.
Exactly. Exactly. And the other piece of advice I would give is don't expect to do it on your own. You know, I remember when I did give up a proper job, one of the first things I missed, and I didn't realize how much I would, was that ability to go into an office or go into a work environment and have a sounding board and to bounce ideas off of people and to feel like you had, you know, shared interests and a shared passion about something. So find a networking group, find a coach, go and find someone who appreciates what you're trying to do and can support that. You know, it could be friends, it could be family, it could be a professional, but that I think is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's another thing that I've
Yeah,
found just doing having the conversations we had thus far, that it can be lonely. It
yeah,
can be a lonely pursuit, because you do feel like it is all resting on your shoulders, and there is never going to be anyone else who understands what you're doing to the same degree as you do. And why would they?
yeah,
But those people who are most likely to understand are other people who are doing it, have done it, or are
yeah,
trying to do it as well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there that will be happy to mentor you. Even you just got to ask. And again, I've nicked this from Peter Thompson. I remember him saying, "If you don't ask, you don't give people a chance to say yes." And
Oh,
that
nice.
is a lovely saying, isn't it? Because I
Yes.
think a lot of us won't ask because we're worried people will say no. But if you don't
Mm.
ask, you're not giving people a chance to say yes.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, because it feels nice, right? To help
Yeah,
somebody else. It's
yeah,
part of being human. And
yeah,
you're denying someone else that
yeah,
opportunity to have that nice feeling.
yeah.
That's a really great sentiment. Yeah, I love that. Where can people find you, Jackie?
So LinkedIn is probably a good place to find me, Jacky Leonard, MCIPD. Or you can go on to my website, which is jackyleonard.co.uk.
Lovely. And what haven't we talked about that maybe you would like to, or we should have?
Joe, I think as I emailed you yesterday, and because only yesterday I got a chance to have a look at some of the questions that you said you were going to ask, and I think you've asked some great questions today. And
Thank you.
what I've liked particularly about it is it's been conversation,
Mm.
rather than rather than
Brilliant.
rather than the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, I've really, really enjoyed it, and I've really learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
No, thank you. It's been lovely touching base again after all these years.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.